the gardener of the moonlit palace. On Mara Vale's first morning at the summer palace, she found a flower that had been dead for 73 years. It grew beside a cracked marble basin in a garden no one had entered since the old king was young. The flower was small. That was what surprised her most. Mara had spent 32 years working with plants, and she had learned that people expected rare things to announce themselves. They imagined lost flowers as enormous, jeweled blossoms with perfume that could drift across a valley. They expected ancient trees to twist dramatically toward the sky and magical herbs to glow in the dark. But this flower was no larger than the silver button on Mara's gardening coat. 5 pale blue petals surrounded a center the color of cream. Along the edge of each petal ran a faint white line as delicate as frost. Mara crouched beside it. "Well," she murmured. A bee moved lazily through the lavender behind her. Morning sunlight had only just begun to reach over the eastern wall. The abandoned gardens were still cool, their paths damp with dew. Mara touched the soil beside the flower, loose, freshly worked. She looked around. The summer palace garden stretched over nearly 40 acres, descending from the palace terraces toward a small lake. Once, according to the drawings she had been given, the grounds had contained orchards, fountains, herb gardens, rose walks, shaded courtyards, ponds, terraces, and a famous collection of plants gathered from every province in the kingdom. Now they contained mostly weeds, beautiful weeds in some places. Mara respected a determined weed, but weeds nevertheless. The palace itself stood above her, built from honey-colored stone. Its long windows reflected the morning sky. Ivy had climbed across the western wing, and swallows nested beneath the carved balconies. No royal family had spent a summer there in nearly 50 years. Mara had been hired to change that. Not the palace. That was someone else's problem. The gardens were hers. She looked again at the blue flower. She knew it from an old botanical illustration. Moonlace. The last recorded specimen had died in the Royal Conservatory 73 years ago. Mara sat back on her heels. Interesting. She had said the same word when a greenhouse roof collapsed during a hailstorm. Her apprentices had learned that when Mara called something interesting, it usually meant trouble. But Mara had no apprentices here. She had specifically requested none. At 56, she had reached the pleasant stage of life in which she knew precisely how much company she wanted, usually less than people offered. She stood, brushed soil from her trousers, and studied the surrounding bed. Yesterday, this entire corner had been untouched. She was certain of it. She had walked every accessible path upon arriving. She had examined the old fountain, the dead pear espalier, the collapsed pergola, the ruined greenhouse, the overgrown herb beds, and the southern terraces where Rosemary had swallowed 2 marble statues almost completely. The ground around the basin had been hard and tangled with bindweed. Now a circle roughly 6 feet across had been weeded. Not quickly either, carefully. Someone had loosened the earth around the surviving lavender roots. Someone had trimmed the thyme. Someone had cleared the channels that once carried water toward the basin. And someone had planted moonlace. Mara examined the footprints. There were none. She looked toward the gardener's gate. Locked. The palace caretaker, Mr. Pell, had given Mara the only key. At least he claimed it was the only one. Mara straightened. Very well, she told the unseen gardener. Then she went to breakfast. The summer palace kitchen had been reopened for the restoration workers, though calling the current staff a kitchen establishment was generous. There was Mrs. Bell, who cooked. There was Tom, her nephew, who carried things. And there was a gray cat named Minister, whose official duties appeared to involve sleeping on sacks of flour. Mara entered through the kitchen door, carrying the moonlace drawing she had retrieved from her field guide. Mrs. Bell was kneading bread. "You look pleased," she said. "I'm suspicious." For you, that's nearly the same expression. Mara poured herself coffee. "Did anyone enter the gardens last night?" "No." "Are you certain?" "No." Mara looked at her. Mrs. Bell shrugged. "I was asleep. Does anyone else have a key? Probably. Mr. Pell says no. Mr. Pell says many things with great confidence." Mara smiled despite herself. Mrs. Bell had been at the palace for 3 weeks and had already formed firm opinions about everyone involved in its restoration. Someone worked in the East Garden. At night? Apparently. That seems inconvenient. It does. Maybe they enjoy privacy. So do I. I still work during daylight. Mrs. Bell dusted flour from her hands. What did they do? Mara placed the illustration on the table. Mrs. Bell leaned closer. Her expression changed. Where did you find that? Beside the marble basin. Mrs. Bell looked toward the windows. Growing? Blooming. For once, Mrs. Bell had nothing to say. You recognize it, Mara said. My grandmother used to talk about moonlace. Your grandmother worked here? Her mother did, laundry mostly, sometimes in the kitchens. Mrs. Bell wiped her hands on her apron. She said moonlace only grew at the summer palace. It grew elsewhere once. Maybe, but that's not what people around here say. What do people around here say? Mrs. Bell gave her a long look. Then she smiled. You've been here one day. Yes. You should probably wait until you're second before we start on royal secrets. Mara drank her coffee. That sounds reasonable. By noon she had asked Mr. Pell about the garden keys. He insisted there were only two. One for you, he said, and one in the palace records room. Where is that? Locked. Who has the key? I do. Did you enter it last night? No. Did anyone? No. Are you certain? Mr. Pell looked mildly offended. Unlike Mrs. Bell, he was always certain. He was a tall, narrow man in his 60s, with white hair combed so neatly that Mara suspected even strong wind would apologize before disturbing it. The records room has not been open in 11 years. Why? No reason to open it. That seems a poor reason for a room. Mr. Pell ignored this. Is something missing? Something has been added. This clearly struck him as worse. Mara explained. Mr. Pell followed her to the east garden. When he saw the moonlace, he stopped. Oh, he said. Mara glanced at him. You recognize it too. My father showed me pictures. Did your father work here? He was caretaker before me. Mr. Pell approached the flower but did not touch it. My family has looked after this palace for 4 generations. Then perhaps your family knows who gardens here at night? Mr. Pell looked toward the palace. No one gardens here at night. Mara folded her arms. The weeds have developed impressive technique. He almost smiled. Almost. I'll check the gates. Thank you. And the records room. Thank you. He began walking away. Mr. Pell. He turned. Why was moonlace important? His face became unreadable. It was the queen's favorite flower. Which queen? Queen Elianor. Mara knew the name. Everyone did. Elianor had been the grandmother of the current king. She had died young, though Mara could not remember exactly how. There were songs about her. Most were sentimental and historically unreliable. Was this her garden? Mr. Pell looked again at the little blue flower. All of this was hers. Then he left. Mara spent the afternoon working. It was what she did when confronted by mysteries. Other people talked. Mara pruned. She cleared a path running north from the basin toward an old avenue of hornbeams. She removed dead wood from 3 roses that turned out to be very much alive. She discovered a stone bench beneath a curtain of ivy. By evening, her shoulders ached pleasantly. She stood on the palace terrace and looked down over the grounds. Even neglected, the garden possessed a strange harmony. The central avenue descended toward the lake, but smaller paths wandered away from it in unexpected directions. Groves concealed courtyards. Hedges curved around forgotten spaces. Water channels appeared beneath weeds and disappeared under stones. It was not a garden designed to be understood at once. Mara liked that. The setting sun turned the palace windows gold. Far beyond the garden walls, fields rolled toward low blue hills. Sheep moved slowly along a distant slope. The kingdom was at peace. It had been for years. That was partly why the royal household had decided to restore the summer palace. The current queen wanted a place where her grandchildren could spend summers away from court. Mara had been given 18 months. She suspected she would need 3 years. Royal deadlines, in her experience, were merely ordinary deadlines wearing better clothes. That night she slept in the former head gardener's house near the western wall. It was a sturdy building with 3 rooms downstairs, 2 upstairs, and a roof that leaked only when rain came from the north. Mara liked it immediately. She ate bread, cheese, and an apple beside the open window. Crickets chirped in the grass. Afterward she read for perhaps 20 minutes before falling asleep with the book on her chest. When she woke, dawn had barely begun. Mara dressed quickly and walked into the garden. She went directly to the marble basin. Nothing had changed. The moonlace remained. She felt an unreasonable flicker of disappointment. Then she noticed the path. Beyond the basin, where yesterday there had been a wall of brambles, A narrow passage had been cleared. Mara stared. Someone had worked for hours. She followed it. The path curved beneath old hazel trees and entered a garden she had not yet been able to reach. At its center stood a circular pond, or what had once been a pond. Now it was mostly mud and reeds. But along its edge someone had cleared a section of stonework and planted 7 small ferns. Mara crouched. Her heartbeat quickened. Silver fern. Another lost species. Not extinct everywhere, perhaps, but no living specimen had been recorded in the kingdom for nearly 40 years. Mara touched one frond. Cool droplets of water clung to it. Beside the fern lay a small wooden marker. On it, written in neat black ink, were 2 words, for shade. Mara looked around. Very amusing. No answer came. Birdsong filled the hazel grove. She picked up the marker. The handwriting was elegant but unpretentious. She carried it in her pocket all day. The following morning, someone had repaired 20 feet of irrigation channel. The morning after that, a patch of white starwort appeared beside the southern wall. Then came mountain violet. Then golden rue. Plants Mara had only seen pressed between the pages of herbarium books began appearing throughout the abandoned garden. Each morning, the unknown gardener restored one small section. Never too much, never carelessly, and always somewhere Mara had not been working. It became, though she refused to admit it, a conversation. Mara pruned the western orchard. The next morning, the nighttime gardener cleared the neglected berry walk. Mara rebuilt the border around the sundial. Overnight, someone repaired the stone steps below it. She restored the thyme garden. The stranger uncovered the fountain beside it. They never worked on the same ground, but they were clearly watching each other's progress. After 2 weeks, Mara left a note beneath the marble basin. You are overwatering the silver fern. The next morning, beneath it, she found a reply. You are underfeeding the climbing roses. Mara stared at the handwriting. Then she laughed. It was the first time Mrs. Bell heard her laugh in the gardens. After that, the notes continued. Mara wrote, the north wall needs repairing before anything is planted there. The reply came, agreed. Another day, where did you find mountain violet? The answer, here. That annoyed her. She wrote, that is not an answer. The reply, it is the correct one. Mara began looking forward to mornings. She told herself it was professional curiosity. Mrs. Bell did not believe her. You're corresponding with a ghost, she said one afternoon. I doubt ghost compost. Perhaps this one is practical. Mara sliced a pear. Whoever it is knows the garden. Better than you? Mara gave her a look. Mrs. Bell laughed. Ah, so that's the problem. They know things I don't. Terrible. It is. Perhaps you could ask. I have. And they're irritating. Mrs. Bell nodded sympathetically. Even worse than knowledgeable. Mara had been at the palace a month when she found the first real clue. She was clearing ivy from a stone wall in the old kitchen garden when her shears struck metal. Behind the vines was a small bronze plaque. Most of the inscription had turned green with age. Mara cleaned it with her thumb. Elianor's second garden. Below that were smaller words. For what returns when given time. Mara read it twice. She had seen no mention of a second garden in the palace plans. That evening she asked Mr. Pell. He became quiet. There were stories, he said. What kind? That Queen Elianor maintained a private garden. Where? No one knows. Someone knows. Mr. Pell looked toward the open window. Outside, evening light settled across the terrace. My father believed the garden was destroyed after her death. Why? Because the king ordered it closed. Her husband? Yes. Why? Mr. Pell hesitated. Grief, I suppose. Mara waited. Silence often worked better than questions. Eventually, Mr. Pell sighed. King Aldrin adored his wife. Everyone agrees on that. After she died, he never returned here. And the garden? He ordered the staff to remove certain plants. Some were sent to universities, some to private collections, while most died eventually. Moonlace? Among them. Why remove them? I don't know. Mara thought about the plaque. For what returns when given time? Can I see the records room? Mr. Pell frowned. You said it hasn't been opened in 11 years. That is correct. So it's overdue. The following morning he unlocked it. The room smelled of dust, leather, and old paper. Mara spent 4 hours there. She found payroll records, planting inventories, weather journals, construction accounts, correspondence with seed merchants, and endless lists of fruit trees. No private garden, no explanation. Then, near the bottom of a cabinet, she found a thin volume bound in faded green cloth. On the cover were the words, Summer Palace Garden Book, Year 3 and 12. The handwriting inside changed halfway through. The first half belonged to a professional gardener. The second was written by Queen Elianor herself. Mara recognized several passages describing plants. Moonlace prefers morning shade. Silver fern dislikes iron-rich soil. Golden rue should never be cut before seed. Then on the final page, the second garden is nearly complete. Aldrin still thinks I am merely collecting flowers. Perhaps I am, but I have begun to think gardens remember what people forget. Mara read the line again. A floorboard creaked outside. She looked up. No one was there. That night, Mara did not sleep. Not because she was frightened, because she was annoyed. She had spent a month being politely outmaneuvered by someone who clearly knew more than she did. At 11, she got out of bed. She dressed. The moon was nearly full. Mara walked through the western gate without a lamp. The garden looked completely different at night. Paths she knew became pale ribbons. Trees became dark, gentle shapes. The palace seemed to float above the terraces, its windows silver with moonlight. Mara waited beneath the hornbeams. An hour passed. Nothing. She began to feel foolish. Then she heard it. Snip, pause, snip. Someone was pruning. Mara followed the sound. It came from the old rose court. She moved quietly along the path. At the entrance she stopped. A man stood beneath the broken pergola. He was perhaps 60, tall though slightly stooped at the shoulders. His hair was mostly gray. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, and his hands were dark with soil. A basket sat beside him. He was pruning a rose. Mara watched for a moment. His technique was excellent. That irritated her too. "You missed a dead cane," she said. The man froze, then slowly turned. He had a narrow, thoughtful face and calm gray eyes. For several seconds neither spoke. Then he looked back at the rose. "Where?" Mara pointed. "Behind the main stem." He leaned closer. "Ah." He clipped it. "Thank you." "You're welcome." He set down the shears. "I wondered when you would stay awake. I wondered when you would stop trespassing." "That is more complicated." "Is it?" "Yes." "Do you own the palace?" "No." "Then I imagine it's fairly simple." The man smiled, not broadly, but enough. "My name is Elias, Mara." "I know." "That is not reassuring." "I saw the appointment notice." "Where?" "In the village." Mara studied him. "You live nearby?" "Yes." "You have a key?" "Yes." "You have plants that are supposed to be extinct?" "Apparently." "And you know Queen Elianor's garden?" "Yes." Mara folded her arms. Elias sighed. "I suppose you would like an explanation." "I would like several." He looked toward a stone bench. "Would you accept tea first?" Mara blinked. "You brought tea?" "I usually do." He lifted a small flask from the basket. There were 2 cups. Mara looked at them. "You expected me?" "Eventually." They sat beneath the broken pergola. The tea was mint with something floral she could not identify. "What is that?" "Moonlace." Mara nearly spat it out. "You made tea from an extinct plant?" "It grows very well." "Where?" Elias drank calmly. "In the second garden." Mara stared at him. "You know where it is?" "Yes." "Where?" He looked at the moonlit path. "I can show you." "Now?" "If you like." Mara stood immediately. Elias smiled. "I thought you might." They walked south. He led her beyond the rosemary terrace, through an orchard, and toward a part of the grounds Mara believed ended at the outer wall. Instead, behind a giant yew, Elias pushed aside a curtain of branches. There was a door, not a gate, a door built directly into the stone wall. He unlocked it. Beyond was a narrow path descending between trees. Mara followed. The air grew cooler. After perhaps 200 yards, the path opened. Mara stopped. Below them lay a hidden valley. It was not large, perhaps 5 acres, but moonlight filled it completely. Terraces descended toward a spring-fed pool. Fruit trees grew along the slopes. Flowers covered the ground in irregular drifts. Mara recognized moonlace, silver fern, golden rue, and dozens more she did not know. Some flowers seemed almost luminous, though she suspected that was simply the moon, almost. At the valley's center stood a small stone pavilion. Mara whispered, "Good heavens." Elias stood beside her. "This is Queen Elianor's second garden." They descended. Mara forgot to ask questions. For nearly an hour she simply looked. She touched leaves, smelled flowers, examined bark, kneaded soil between her fingers. Elias followed without interrupting. Finally she turned to him. "How? My family kept it. For 70 years? Longer? Your family worked for the queen?" "My grandmother did." "As a gardener?" Elias nodded. She was 19 when Queen Elianor died, and she kept this place secret. She was asked to. By whom? The Queen. Mara looked around. Why? Elias sat on the edge of the pavilion. That is the royal secret. It turned out to be a remarkably gentle secret. Queen Elianor had not created the second garden for herself. She had created it for ordinary people. At a time when rare plants belonged almost entirely to royal collections, wealthy estates, and universities, Elianor believed useful and beautiful plants should be preserved somewhere beyond politics. She was worried about war, Elias explained. There wasn't a war during her reign. No, but there had been one during her childhood. Several provinces lost orchards, seed houses, entire local varieties. Mara nodded. She knew the history. Elianor began collecting quietly. Farmers sent seeds. Monasteries sent herbs. Gardeners exchanged cuttings. And the king didn't know. He knew she had a garden. He didn't know its purpose. Why hide that? Because some of the plants technically belonged to royal collections. Mara smiled. She stole them, borrowed permanently. I like her. So did my grandmother. Elias looked toward the pool. Elianor planned to establish public gardens across the kingdom, places where old varieties could be kept and shared freely. What happened? She became ill. Mara knew that part. A fever had swept through the capital. The queen died within a week. The king found her plans afterward, Elias continued. But he misunderstood them. He believed the garden had exhausted her, that she had spent her final months working when she should have rested. So he closed it. Yes, but your grandmother kept it alive. She and 3 others. And after them, their children. And then you. Elias smiled. Mostly me. Mara looked across the terraces. All these years. All these years. Something about that moved her more deeply than she expected. Not the royal story. Not even the rare plants. It was the thought of ordinary hands continuing a task no one applauded. People waking early, carrying water, saving seed, turning compost, replacing stones after winter, decade after decade. Why start restoring the palace garden now? She asked. Elias was quiet. Because you came. That seems a poor reason. It seemed a good one to me. He looked at his hands. I'm 61, Mara. I had noticed you weren't 20. Thank you. You're welcome. He laughed softly. I've cared for this garden alone for 14 years. I began wondering what would happen when I couldn't. Mara understood. Plants did not care about sentiment. A garden needed hands. I saw the notice saying the palace gardens would be restored. Then I saw your name. You knew my work? Everyone who cares about old gardens knows your work. Mara was not accustomed to compliments and generally distrusted them. But Elias said it without flattery. I thought, he continued, perhaps it was time. For what? For the second garden to stop being secret. They sat quietly. Above them, the moon moved between thin clouds. Mara thought of Queen Elianor's words. Gardens remember what people forget. When will you tell the palace? She asked. Elias looked at her. I hoped you might help me decide. That was how their friendship began. Not with romance. Not immediately. It began with disagreement. Mara believed the royal household should be informed at once. Elias believed they should first document everything. Mara argued that secrecy had already lasted too long. Elias argued that once officials arrived, they might take control of the collection. Mara said the kingdom had changed. Elias said kingdoms always believed they had changed. They compromised. For the next 3 months, they worked together. By day, Mara restored the public gardens. By evening, Elias joined her. He stopped sneaking in at night, though he still preferred working after sunset when the weather was warm. They cataloged the hidden valley. 712 living varieties grew there. Some were common, some rare. 23 were believed extinct. Mara found that Elias knew plants intimately, but kept terrible written records. Elias discovered that Mara labeled everything. You labeled the buckets, he said one morning. Yes, they are buckets. One is for compost tea. It smells like compost tea. That is not a reliable identification system. He held up another. This one says water. It contains water. I'm beginning to understand you. I doubt it. But she smiled. They became comfortable together. That surprised Mara. She had lived alone for 19 years. There had been a marriage once, a good one, mostly. Her husband, Daniel, had been a cabinet maker who loved music badly and enthusiastically. He had died when Mara was 37. She had not spent the following years tragically lonely. She disliked the way people assumed that. She had friends, work, journeys, gardens. A life could be full without replacing every person who left it. Still, Elias occupied a space she had not known was empty. He listened well. He was patient without being passive. He could spend 40 minutes discussing soil acidity and then tell a ridiculous story about his grandmother chasing a goat through the royal orchard. He never tried to impress her. This impressed her. Summer deepened. The abandoned palace grounds slowly changed. Paths emerged. Fountains ran again. Roses climbed, repaired frames. The orchard produced its first serious harvest in decades. Villagers were hired to help. Mara eventually accepted 2 apprentices, both young women from nearby farms. She pretended this had been her idea. Mrs. Bell pretended to believe her. One August evening, Mara and Elias sat beside the restored lily pond eating peaches. They had worked until sunset. Elias leaned against the stone rim. "Do you ever miss your old garden?" he asked. Mara had managed the botanical grounds in the capital for 22 years before resigning. "Sometimes." "Why did you leave?" She turned the peach in her hand. "Everyone assumed I wanted to become director." "Did you?" "For years." "And then?" "I got close enough to see the job." Elias laughed. Mara smiled. "It was meetings, budgets, ceremonies, committees deciding where gardeners should garden." "Terrifying." "Exactly." "So you left." "I thought I would take a year. And then this came." "Yes." "Do you regret it?" Mara looked across the water. Dragonflies skimmed the pond. "No." Elias nodded. He did not say he was glad. He did not need to. In September, they found Queen Elianor's final message. It was hidden in the stone pavilion. Mara noticed that one paving stone was slightly raised. Beneath it lay a copper box. Inside was a packet wrapped in wax cloth. There were seeds and a note. The paper was fragile, but the writing remained clear. Mara read aloud. "If this garden survives me, then it has already proved what I hoped." She paused. Elias stood beside her. "Continue." Mara did. "No beautiful thing is preserved by ownership alone. It survives because someone cares for it and because eventually someone shares it." Below that was a list of villages, 24 names. Beside each was a plant. Mara understood immediately. She intended to send them back. Elias nodded slowly. "The varieties, to the places they came from." For decades, everyone had misunderstood the second garden, even Elias's family. It had never been intended as a permanent vault. It was a nursery, a place of return. Mara sat on the pavilion step. "That changes things, yet we can't keep it hidden." "No." This time, Elias did not argue. The royal household arrived in October. Not the king. His daughter, Princess Celine, came instead. She was 43, practical, curious, and entirely unlike the portraits of royal women Mara had seen hanging in the palace. She wore muddy boots within an hour. Mara liked her. They showed her the hidden garden. Elias told the story. Mara showed her the records. The princess read Elianor's final note twice. "My great-grandmother wrote this?" "Yes," Elias said. Celine walked alone through the terraces for nearly half an hour. When she returned, her eyes were bright. "My grandfather never spoke about this place." "Perhaps he didn't know," Mara said. "He knew there was a secret." The princess looked toward the moonlace. "He spent his life believing his mother had hidden something from the family." "She did," Elias said gently. "Just not what he imagined." Celine smiled sadly. "No, apparently she hid seeds." There was something wonderfully ordinary about that. The royal secret that had survived 3 generations was not scandal, betrayal, treasure, or forbidden magic. It was a plan for public gardens. The princess approved it within a month. Not exactly as Elianor had written. Times had changed, but 24 communities were contacted. Seeds and cuttings would be returned. Agricultural schools would help propagate rare varieties. The hidden valley would remain protected, but it would no longer be secret. Mara expected Elias to be delighted. Instead, he became quiet. Winter approached. The public gardens were entering dormancy. Leaves fell from the hornbeams. The fountains were drained. Workers covered tender plants. One cold afternoon, Mara found Elias beside the second garden's pool. "You're unhappy," she said. "No, you're a poor liar." "I'm an excellent liar." "You kept a garden secret for decades. That is secrecy, not lying." He smiled faintly. Mara sat beside him. "What is it?" Elias watched leaves floating on the water. "My grandmother gave me the key when I was 28. Mara waited. "She said, 'Keep it until it doesn't need keeping.'" He looked around. I always imagined I would know what that meant. And now it doesn't need keeping. Mara understood. The purpose that had shaped his adult life was complete. People often imagined fulfillment felt like triumph. Sometimes it felt like loss. What will you do? She asked. I don't know. That must be unpleasant. It is. Good. He looked at her. Good? You've known what you were supposed to do for 33 years. Yes. Perhaps uncertainty is overdue. Elias laughed. That is terrible comfort. I'm a gardener, not a priest. They sat until the afternoon became cold. Then Mara stood. Come on. Where? The north greenhouse. Why? The heating pipes are failing. That sounds miserable. It is. Elias took her offered hand as she pulled him up. Neither let go immediately. It was a small moment, quiet, almost nothing. But Mara felt it. So did he. Their hands separated. They walked back toward the palace. Winter settled over the valley. Snow came in December. The summer palace became quiet. Most workers left until spring. Mara stayed. So did Elias. He had a house in the village, but increasingly he spent his days at the palace. They repaired tools, sorted seeds, planned beds, argued over pruning schedules and suckles. Belle made soup. Mr. Pell finally admitted he enjoyed cards. On long evenings, the four of them played beside the kitchen stove while Minister slept beneath the table. Mara discovered Elias cheated badly. Elias claimed he was simply creative with rules. By January, the palace felt less abandoned, not restored. Restoration, Mara had learned, was rarely about returning a place to what it had been. It was about allowing it to become useful again without erasing its history. One snowy afternoon, she and Elias walked through the garden. Bare branches drew dark lines against the white sky. Their boots crunched along the path. At the marble basin where Mara had first found moonlace, Elias stopped. You know, he said, I planted that first flower at 3 a.m. Why? I was nervous. Mara stared at him. You were nervous? Terribly. You spent weeks behaving like an irritating woodland spirit. I was trying to seem mysterious. You succeeded at irritating. And mysterious? Moderately. He laughed. Mara brushed snow from the basin. Why moonlace? My grandmother said it was Elianor's favorite. So I heard. She also said it was the first plant Elianor gave away. Mara looked at him. To whom? A kitchen maid whose mother was ill. She thought moonlace tea might help her sleep. Did it? No idea. Mara smiled. Snow began falling again, softly. Elias stood beside her. I'm glad you came here, he said. Mara looked toward the palace. So am I. No. His voice was gentle. I mean, I'm glad it was you. She turned. There are moments in younger lives when affection seems to demand immediate decisions. Mara remembered those. She remembered the urgency of being 25, when every feeling seemed like a door that might close if you did not run through it. At 56, she knew doors could remain open. Sometimes people could simply stand beside them for a while. She touched Elias's sleeve. I know. That was enough. For then, spring returned slowly. First came water. Snow melted from the roofs and ran through the restored channels. Then came birds, then crocuses, then the pale green haze of new leaves. By April, the gardens seemed to wake all at once. The palace reopened. Workers returned. So did officials, botanists, historians, agricultural students, and one extremely enthusiastic royal archivist who nearly fainted upon seeing Elianor's garden book. Mara protected the gardens from them all, especially the botanists. They need access, Princess Celine protested. They need supervision. They are experts, so am I. The princess wisely surrendered. The first plants were returned to their villages in May. Mara and Elias traveled with some of them. They carried golden rue north to a hillside community where old records showed it had once grown beside every farmhouse. They took a rare apple cutting west. Silver fern went to a monastery school. Moonlace went to a village beside the sea. At each place, Elias told the story. At first, he disliked speaking publicly. Then he became good at it. Mara enjoyed watching that. The hidden garden had taught him preservation. Sharing it taught him something else. On their journey home from the coast, they stopped at an inn beside a wide river. The evening was warm. They ate outside beneath an arbor. Boats drifted past. Someone played a fiddle across the water. Elias poured wine. I've been thinking, he said. Dangerous. Yes. Mara waited. I don't want to spend the rest of my life guarding the second garden. No, I think I want to help establish the new ones. Mara smiled. That sounds sensible. You hate sensible. I respect it from a distance. He looked at her. There's another complication. What? You? Mara set down her glass. That is less sensible. Much. The fiddle continued across the river. Elias seemed nervous. She found that unexpectedly touching. I'm too old to pretend I don't know what's happening, Mara said. Thank goodness. And too old to rearrange my life simply because I care for someone. I wouldn't ask you to. I know. She studied him. What exactly are you asking? Elias considered. Whether I might continue being a complication. Mara laughed, a long, warm laugh. People at another table glanced over. She did not care. Yes, she said. Then, because some answers deserve clarity, I would like that very much. Their first kiss happened beside the river. It was not dramatic. No thunder, no magical flowers opening, no sudden music except the distant fiddle, which was playing something cheerful and slightly out of tune. It was a gentle kiss between two people who had spent months learning how the other worked. When they parted, Elias smiled. Was that sensible? No? Good. They returned to the summer palace 2 days later. The gardens were waiting. Summer came. For the first time in half a century, the palace filled with a royal family. Children ran through the orchard. Servants opened windows. Music drifted from terraces. The kitchens worked from dawn until late evening. But the gardens did not become formal or precious. That had been Mara's condition. Children were allowed on the grass. Villagers could visit twice a week. Students worked in the propagation beds. Old varieties were labeled not only with their botanical names, but with the places and people who had preserved them. At the entrance to the second garden, a new plaque was installed. It did not call the place Queen Elianor's garden. The princess refused. Instead it read, The Garden of Returning Things, established by many hands. Mara approved. Years passed, not quickly, not slowly, as years do. The palace changed, so did the garden. Some plants failed, others flourished. Storms broke branches. Children grew taller. Mr. Pell retired but continued appearing every Thursday to criticize the new caretaker. Mrs. Bell eventually stopped cooking professionally and began teaching 3 apprentices who feared her and adored her in equal measure. Minister the cat grew enormously fat and lived to an age everyone considered improbable. Mara stayed. That surprised her. She had expected the summer palace to be one project among many. Instead, it became the garden in which the rest of her life took root. She never became director of anything. She was delighted by this. Elias traveled often, helping establish community gardens from the varieties Queen Elianor had saved. Sometimes Mara went with him. Sometimes she did not. They discovered that love did not require identical lives. He liked traveling. She liked returning. He liked talking to strangers. She liked plants, who generally interrupted less. They kept separate workrooms. This proved essential to their happiness. Eventually, Elias moved into the gardener's house. His books appeared first, then boots, then an unreasonable number of clay pots. Mara complained about all 3. She never asked him to remove them. Every year, on the first warm night of spring, they worked after dark. It became their private tradition. No one else knew why. They would carry a flask of moonlace tea into the garden and choose one neglected corner. Not an important one, not something visitors would notice. A patch behind a wall, a forgotten border, a small path beneath trees. They worked quietly under the moon until it was restored. Then they left a wooden marker for shade, or needs water, or try again next year. Once, Elias wrote, Mara says this is planted too deep. She found it the following morning. Beneath it she added, Mara is correct. Years later, when both of them had gone gray and the palace garden had become famous throughout the kingdom, young gardeners sometimes asked Mara which part of the restoration made her proudest. They expected her to mention the rose court, or the orchards, or the second garden. She usually pointed towards some ordinary patch of earth. Whatever we're working on now. That answer confused them, but Elias understood. One autumn evening, long after the visitors had left, Mara walked alone through the garden. Elias was away for 3 days helping a school establish an orchard. The air smelled of leaves and apples. She passed the marble basin. Moonlace still grew there. Not one flower now, hundreds. She followed the path toward the hidden valley. It was no longer truly hidden. The door remained, but it was unlocked during daylight. She descended. The terraces glowed in the late afternoon. Students had finished work for the day. Tools were stacked neatly beside the pavilion. Mara sat near the pool. She thought about Elianor, a woman she had never known, a queen who had planted things she would never live to see mature. Mara understood her better now. Gardening required a peculiar relationship with time. You planted trees for shade you might never sit beneath. You restored soil for flowers someone else might grow. You saved seeds because one day a person you would never meet might need them. And perhaps people were not so different. They carried pieces of one another forward. Daniel still lived somewhere in Mara's laughter. Elias's grandmother lived in the garden. Elianor lived in 24 villages where old plants grew again. Nothing returned exactly as it had been. That was not the point. The point was that something returned. Footsteps sounded on the path. Mara turned. Elias came through the trees carrying a travel bag. "You're early." "The coachman drives like a criminal." "You encouraged him." "I did." He sat beside her. For a while they said nothing. The sun dropped behind the western wall. A breeze moved across the pool. "How was the school?" Mara asked. "Chaotic." "Good." 30 children planted apple trees. "How many correctly?" "Perhaps 7. "Excellent." "I thought you'd say terrible." "No. 7 trees planted correctly by 30 children is an agricultural miracle." Elias laughed. He took her hand. Their hands were older now. Mara noticed that sometimes. The skin thinner, the veins more visible, small scars from decades of thorns, tools, splinters, winter cracks. Gardener's hands. She liked them. "Do you remember the night you found me?" Elias asked. "You were butchering a rose. I missed one cane. A significant cane. It survived. Because I arrived." "Of course." The first stars appeared. Behind them, somewhere near the upper terrace, a bell rang from the palace kitchen. Dinner. Neither moved. "Another minute," Mara said. Elias nodded. They remained beside the water. The garden darkened gradually around them. Moonlace flowers began to show pale among the leaves. Mara had spent years determining whether they actually reflected more moonlight than ordinary flowers. They did. Slightly. She had published a paper about it. Elias insisted this ruined the mystery. Mara insisted understanding something did not make it less wonderful. They had never settled the argument. She hoped they never would. Night gathered softly over the valley. Beyond the wall, the palace windows began glowing one by one. Somewhere a child laughed. A door closed. Water moved through the channels Elianor had designed generations before. The garden was no longer abandoned, no longer secret, no longer waiting. It was simply alive. And because it was alive, it was unfinished. There would always be another branch to prune, another seed to save, another path to clear, another person arriving who did not yet know what they would find there. Mara leaned against Elias. He rested his cheek against her hair. Neither spoke. Above them, the moon rose over the summer palace. Its light touched the terraces, the pool, the old pavilion, the orchard beyond the wall, and the little blue flowers growing beside a marble basin where years ago a gardener had discovered something thought lost. The moonlace stirred in the evening breeze, and throughout the garden, in soil tended by generations of hands, quiet things continued returning.